video to help you if you lead, teach, or facilitate an on-campus small group that meets on September the 11th. So if you're that person and you're going to be leading a group on Sunday, September 11th, you got the right one. Hey, as we get ready to get into this, go ahead and make sure that you have your Bible. Make sure you've got something to write with. And if you haven't done so already, go ahead and print out the lesson manuscript. You should have received that as an attachment with the email that has the link for this video. If you've gone directly to Dayspring Groups to look at the video, go back and check your email and see if you've got that link with the small group lesson there for Sunday, September the 11th. And go ahead and get that in front of you before we get into the video itself. We had a great day Sunday, and it was just a really neat time together as we got to celebrate, in a sense, with Sarah and Drew and their family as they preparing to move on to the city that God has called them to, and getting involved there in the work that He has for them. And it's just neat to be able to be a part of that with them. And we're excited about what God has for them in the days ahead. Obviously, it means God has something for us as well in this particular area at Dayspring, in being the sending church, so to speak, for them, but also for us, what God has in place for us for the next stage of ministry here, and the position that Drew had here as well. So some exciting things there for them, exciting things for us as well. And it just was a really good day Sunday. And if you missed it, you be sure and go and grab hold of the video or the audio of the Sunday's message. You can get that on the website or the app, and catch up, because it's one of those times that you want to know that you are a part of it, however that it may have been. And so it's going to be some good days there for them, good days for Dayspring, and Sunday was one of those there. Hey, we're getting ready to start a new series that we're going to enter into, a sermon series this Sunday, that we're going to be looking into the concept of the love of Christ. And what we're going to be doing there, as you're going to discover in this lesson and being here Sunday, we're going to be looking at the love, the depth of God's love, the width of God's love, the height of God's love. And we're going to be examining that and learning some really neat things about not only how much God loves us, but then how that love gets worked out into our own lives. In fact, that's what the small group lessons are going to be looking at starting this Sunday. We're going to be doing, along with this sermon series, we're going to be a 4-week study, a 4-week series, so to speak, in our small group lessons out of the book of 1 Corinthians 13. And what we're going to be doing is looking there at not only as we learn more about how much God loves us and what that love looks like, what Christ's love for us looks like, we're going to be discovering then how, as that love is settled into our own hearts, gets worked out of our lives, what love looks like in our daily lives as well. Kind of answering the so what question, all right? God loves us, so what? Well, we're going to discover that in our small groups on Sunday morning. So going to be a great time together, not only in our worship gatherings, but in your small groups. Be honest, it's going to make some of us uncomfortable, if not all of us, because when we start talking about love and what love looks like in our lives, it's going to probably make us all a little bit uncomfortable, because I've discovered for me, and I'm sure you're going to say the same for you, that's an area that I can really grow in, and an area that I can learn to be more like Jesus in. Now, as we get the material here in front of us, you've got your manuscript there, your lesson. Look there on page 1 is your lesson overview, which I just folded that into those comments there. On page 2 is your introduction. Now, keep in mind, as the gray shaded area says, that introduction is written from the viewpoint of the writer of this lesson. It's obviously one that is very it'll be easy to make a connection with because of the day, September 11th, that we're going to be talking about there. And basically what the point of that intro is that love is not to be discriminatory. In other words, love does not pick and choose where it gets expressed. And so the question that we're going to be asking ourselves, and your small group members need to be wrestling with, is it really love if we are selective or discriminating in who our love is directed to? And that's going to be a big challenge for us there, because you see, one of the things that we'll discover is that Christ's love, God's love, is not discriminating. In fact, his love is for all. In fact, First Timothy chapter 2, verses 3 through 7, I encourage you to go look through those verses, makes the point that God desires for all men, all people to be saved. And all means everyone, even those that you and I think that don't deserve salvation. God's desire is for them to be saved as well. His love is directed towards everyone. It is not a discriminating kind of love. And there's a verse in 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 1 that always kind of rocks me when I read it, when I look at it. It's one of those verses when I think about it, try to contemplate it. It really kind of makes me personally uncomfortable, but it also overwhelms me in seeking to understand love, the love that God has for us, the love of Jesus. Because in that verse, 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 1, go back and read it yourself. In that verse, it basically says this. It says that Jesus loves those who he even knew were going to reject him. Even those that he knew would reject him, because being God, he knows those. He still loved them. He still offered himself as a sacrifice on the cross for them, because his love is non-discriminating. So those are some powerful things to think about. And as you read through the introduction, keep that in mind. And you may need to tailor-make that introduction, or rework that introduction for you, for your class, for your small group members. You'll know what connects with them better than anyone. Now, let's move into teaching the text. And I just kind of want to point out a few things there that hopefully will be helpful to you as your preparation and as you study the text and thinking it through, but also maybe a couple of things to help you as you actually carry out the teaching of the text. One of the things that you're going to discover in this particular section there, the teaching the text, we often try to put in quite a few questions for you to ask to keep the interaction going between you and your class members, and so that it just doesn't become a lecture time, but it becomes an opportunity for you to interact and an opportunity for different ones to contribute in different ways, and keeps the small group members engaged. There's not that many questions in this particular lesson there, so this is going to provide you an opportunity to think that through, and as you go through this, keep that in mind. Keep a think as you work your way through and preparing to teach. Ask yourself, if you were out there listening to this, what question would come to your mind about this section or this particular point? And then maybe use that question to help prompt some interaction as you go through teaching the lesson itself there. Now, in teaching the text, as I said, we're going to be looking at 1 Corinthians chapter 13. This week, we're going on to consider the first 3 verses of that particular chapter. And as you know, this chapter is oftentimes referred to as the love chapter, because it just doesn't give us a definition of love. It also helps us understand what love looks like. It's practically expressed and worked out of our lives. And so that's where we're going to be delving into. Now, in the first few verses there of this chapter, it's following up, of course, chapter 13 follows, guess what? Chapter 12. Yeah. And in chapter 12, there's a big discussion there about spiritual gifts. And basically what it is, it has to do with some people were thinking of themselves more important than others because they had certain gifts. Others were thinking of themselves less important because they had these gifts. And Paul goes through working through that, and basically he ends up with this. He said, look, spiritual gifts are a very special thing that God gives. He gives them to all of his people for the work of the ministry, and they all work together. But he said, here is the best way. Here's the best thing. Let's make sure we don't leave this out. And what he's talking about there is love. And then he jumps into discussion of that in chapter 13. And as you'll see there on page 4 of Teaching the Text, there's a bold print section which summarizes this up, which says Christianity means nothing without love. And that's exactly true. If love is not present, then Christianity has no validity to it. In fact, if you remember, In John chapter 13, Jesus basically gave the unbelieving world the way to evaluate whether our faith is genuine or not, whether our Christianity is genuine or not. Because he says there in John chapter 13, verse 34 and 35, he said, "By this all men will know that you are my disciples." And he's talking about the expressing of love, how that love gets worked out, in serving others. And so there is a sense of where Jesus says, hey, the world has has the right to evaluate the validity of your Christianity based on this. So keep that in mind as we work through that as well. Now, there's another passage that I also think is important and that ties in with this, and maybe a complementary passage for you to look at in your prep, as well as maybe use in your lesson. And that's 2 Peter chapter 1, verses 3 through 10. And I'm not going to read those verses for you because I want to try to keep, hopefully, this video down to 15 or 20 minutes. But what I want you to do is to go look at that. And I want you to notice as you work your way through that see the bottom, that it eventually ends up with all of the different aspects he talks about there of our faith, ends up in the love. And love becomes the litmus test for our faith. And keeping that in mind and using that kind of as a backdrop of what we're talking about here in this particular lesson. Now, the gray shaded area there in the teaching tip is a very important point that you want to look at and take notice of because it does talk about our natural reaction oftentimes is the opposite of love. And that's understandable because that's the way we're in our natural state, our unregenerative state, our non-believing state. We tend to react without love. We tend to react in kind of what we have been given to us. And Jesus makes it clear, as the lesson points out in Matthew 5, that our response is to be the opposite of that. That we are not to react in kind to how we're treated. We're always to act in love. And so as you go through that, keep that in mind too. But here's an important thing to remember. 2 Corinthians chapter 5:17 tells us, therefore, if any man is in Christ, he is a new creation, that God has remade us. And so in our redeemed state, redeemed by the blood of the Lamb, redeemed by Jesus, as we come to faith in him, God begins to do a new work in us. So listen to this. Our new natural state for believers is to respond in love. So just use that, or if it's helpful for you, but in your prep or actually in your group itself. Now, the first major point is this, is it makes no difference how impressive you sound if you don't have love. And here's what he's talking about in that. He's just saying basically we got to move past just the words that we use and how we use them, our speech. We've got to look past that and look for the motive behind that. Because if what we're saying and how we're saying it is not motivated by love, then our words at best are just empty. They have no meaning to them there. And we get into this aspect of what is it that drives us? What is our motives behind what we do? And he uses an illustration there, as you'll see about the top of page 5, where it talks about, ask the question rather, about where do we usually sound a little bit more spiritually impressive or try to sound more spiritually impressive. And usually that has to do with our prayer life. It's interesting, oftentimes in our how some of us in our prayer life, we start using King James Version English when we start praying. And obviously the reality is we don't normally talk that way. I'm guessing you don't anyway, but we normally don't talk that way. And somehow we seem to think if we use that, it sounds better to God for some reason. And obviously that's not the case, because the point is that prayer is a conversation, and it's a conversation we have with God. But it also drives home the point that if that sounds unnatural in our conversation with God, it probably sounds unnatural in our conversation with others as well. And we need to back up and look and see what it is that's motivating us to do that. Now, there is an illustration he uses about a church planter here, probably for your small group. That illustration is not going to connect as well as another, so I would encourage you to search for maybe an illustration that fits your group better. And as we come to the conclusion on that section, here's a statement for you to think about. When we spiritualize our speech and our efforts, the result is not love. and to spiritualize our speech and our efforts. But if the result is not love, or if the result is not love, then it amounts to zero, nothing. Point number 2 is on page 6. It says it makes no difference how much you know if you don't have love. And obviously he's talking about how the aspect of love and knowledge. There's some good illustration in here and some good info to keep that in mind. There is a statement here about towards the end of page 6 that I don't want you to miss. It says we have somehow come to the conclusion that the best way to change the world is for us to learn more stuff about God. Now, don't misunderstand what is being said here. Knowledge, biblical knowledge, the gaining of information is vitally important for every one of us. But if we are just gaining knowledge for knowledge's sake, then it really has become non-effective. See, the problem is when we see that, as you see the question or the statement there on top of the next page, page 7, I believe it is. It says the problem is with those who seek knowledge as an end instead of a means to an end. And that's a very important statement. You will phrase it however it fits you, but I think it's something that needs to be driven home with your group and get some reaction from them on that regard. By the way, here's another verse that might help you in thinking this through. 1 Corinthians chapter 8, verse 1, which points out the fact that knowledge just for knowledge's sake makes us proud. And the result of pride is arrogance. And arrogance can lead to being destructive. Love is just the opposite of that. Love leads us to humility, and humility leads to us being effective in the lives of others. And so you can use that or think that through, maybe something you can bring into your discussion, put that verse out there and get a reaction from your small group, and how does that fit into what we're speaking about here as well. There's another, he makes reference to John chapter 5, verse 39 through 40, which is a good place to take your group to think through this aspect of this point we're making here about that knowledge without love just really doesn't mean anything, because we have to ask ourselves the question. In fact, here's a couple of questions you might want to ask. How effective is knowledge for knowledge's sake? And thinking that through, not just in the context of what we're talking about here in regards to our faith, but what good is an education if what you've learned is not translated into some type of skill or ability? Just think that through. Ask that. If you go get a college education, you've got this degree, and you've got all this information, but it doesn't get translated into a skill or an ability, what good does that do you in the marketplace? And the answer is going to be nothing. The same thing's true in regards to biblical knowledge without love. You can have a lot of Bible and still be a mean person. I don't mean to be critical. I'm just going to state the fact that you can have a lot of Bible knowledge, a lot of information, and if that information is not being translated into life and living out life God's way, then you're not going to be a loving person. Knowledge in and of itself doesn't make you loving. What you do with it will, and how you live it out. A head full of biblical knowledge without a heart of love for others is a spiritual landmine. I'm going to repeat that, and it may be something you can throw out for your group to use or to react to as well. A head full of biblical knowledge without a heart of love for God and others is a spiritual landmine. Maybe throw that question out and ask them, why does that create a spiritual landmine in your life or in the life of other people around you? On page 8, we wrap up the discussion of the text. It makes no difference how much you do if you don't have love. And basically what he gets back to is this sense of motivation. You can do a lot of different things for a lot of different reasons, but if love is not what is pushing it, if love is not what's driving it, love for God and love for others, then it really doesn't make any difference whatsoever. And there's some very pointed points that Paul makes in this. That's something you're supposed to grammatically not do in it. Pointed points. There's some very pointed statements that Paul makes in regards to this. some things that are really extreme, because he talks about you can just lay down your life you can lay down your life for the work of the gospel, but if it's not motivated by love for God and others, he says basically it's not effect. So the motivation by love for God or others is really what becomes what makes what we do effective. If it's not motivated by love for God or for others, what we're really doing is serving ourselves instead of God. And selfishness is what drives it. And selfishness without love is simply for us, not others there. Then you move into and kind of use point number 3 as a jumping off place for your small group interaction. You'll find that those small group handouts on page 11. Opportunity for you to break into your small clusters, or however you do that in your class. Work through those application points. Don't miss it. Don't miss it. That's really what gets the truth and helps us move from all of this knowledge we're talking about into how it's expressed in love. And then page 9 is your application moment. Page 10 is the conclusion with your memory verse for the week. Hey, have a great time studying God's Word together, wrestling through this. And as I said before, we're in for an uncomfortable month, but that's a good thing, because it's going to make us uncomfortable with the areas in our life that are not like Jesus, so we can move to becoming more like Jesus in those. Have a great time together Sunday. 'Cause you